A new UN mission in South Sudan report accuses government and opposition forces of deliberately targeting civilians during a surge in conflict in the former Central Equatoria state between September 2018 and April 2019, right after the revitalized peace deal was signed. The report says more than 100 civilians were killed and about 100 women and girls were raped or sexually assaulted. As Winnie Chirino reports for VOA from Juba, both sides deny their forces were involved in any rights violations.
In a recorded audio message sent to South Sudan in Focus, Eugene Ninederera, head of the Human Rights Division at UNMISS, says the violence led to the displacement of more than 56,000 civilians within South Sudan and nearly 20,000 others who crossed into neighboring Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo.
We were able to document 95 incidents, including 30 attacks on villages. And we know that, according to us, there is at least 104 civilians who were killed and 35 others who were injured. And this is really related to the incidents that we have monitored during that period. There were also a number of other civilians, 187, who were abducted for purposes such as forced recruitment, forced labor, or sexual slavery.
Ninederera acknowledges the number of rights violations and abuses across the country has fallen since the signing of last year's peace deal, but he says Central Equatoria, especially Yei, has been an exception to the rule. But he says SPLA-IO and governments carried out attacks against civilians and armed rebel groups who didn't sign the deal. Groups like the National Salvation Front and the South Sudan National Movement for Change are still attacking civilians. Ninederera says the violence took place in two distinct phases, including the SPLA-IO, NAS and SSMC when the groups clashed over territorial control in parts of the former state. He says during the first phase, the groups were responsible for killing at least 61 civilians who were either deliberately targeted or victims of indiscriminate gunfire, and at least 150 civilians were held in captivity by the groups, including women and girls taken as wives by commanders or raped by various fighters. Ninederera says the second phase of violence began in January when the government launched a military campaign to clear out what it called rebels from Central Equatoria region.
Government forces step up operations in the area around Yei, and these operations primarily targeted areas where civilians were perceived to be providing support to NAS and affiliated groups. And that's how they were targeted. And our investigation found that government forces appear to have engaged in a deliberate effort to displace civilians through attacks against on villages, which they achieved in part through the looting and destruction also of private property.
Ninederera says the government forces carried out coordinated campaigns to displace civilians from the areas. Lul Rai Kwang, spokesman for the South Sudan People's Defense Force, denies the accusation.
The report is before me. I can't read, and I would like to say that the report is vague. It's full of generalities. It lacks the specifics needed for the army to launch any meaningful investigation.
Lampo Gabriel, spokesperson for the SPLA-IO, admits that there were clashes in Yei River State after the signing of the September peace agreement, but says SPLA-IO forces fought against the NAS and SSMC in defense of their territory.
What happened in Yei River, specifically I can say around Mokaya, Minyori and western side of Yei, we have been subjected to defend ourselves from these forces of Thomas Cirillo and also Abramwani. They were targeting mostly families of the SPLA-IO soldiers.
Ninederera says enemies deployed an additional 150 troops to intensify patrols within Yei town and to outlying communities to deter violence and enable the safe delivery of humanitarian aid. He says UNMISS Chief David Shearer visited the area several times to engage with political and military leaders about the human rights abuses raised in the report, the impact of displacement, and the need for reconciliation and peace. For VOA News, I am Winnie Chirino in Juba.